So before I launch into details that I can tell I'm about to do, let me do one of those last time on Belly Dance Bedtime Stories. We ended with Rachel beginning to teach and performing at Amira. I don't know if we left off with me performing on the weekends or during the week, but I was performing at Amira. I don't know if I told you my Cafe Istanbul story, but it's funny. I'd like to tell you that one. So we're now in between 2001 and 2003, and at some point I want to tell the story about teaching at Pixar because that was crazy, and everything that I learned there, and mentioning Miles Copeland. I definitely wanted to talk about how I met Miles in 2003, but there's still some development because, I mean, there was more development that happened, definitely more development that happened in the style of belly dance I was doing after I met Miles, but 2001, actually 1999 to 2003, were really when I started to distill exactly what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go with it, and it was a very internal, I don't know if it was internal, it was a very, that's not the word I'm looking for, insular time, where I just sort of found my crew and hung out with my crew and learned from the people I was hanging out with and learned a bunch at school and kind of made the first draft of what I wanted to be working on and started to refine that through weekly performances. And then it really got refined after I met Miles and I started touring every day because everything else stopped. Teaching stopped, everything else stopped, and it was just performance all the time. And that gave me time to play with ideas, and Jelena was such a huge influence in the way that the look started to develop for a larger stage. So all that is, I'm excited to tell you. But this part is also exciting and juicy because it feels like this is where sort of the San Francisco style of belly dance happened to me and within me. And well, it's not just San Francisco style, California style, let's say, because Urban Tribal had a huge part to play in that too. So let's see. I'm actually am I gonna look for your questions here or over here? Oh, good. They're both. Oh, thank you for letting me know that hone in is more common in America and home in is more British. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right. I can't believe I'm going to have YouTube up in like 10 different places. However, it's easier to read your comments on here, so I'm going to go to YouTube over here. And hopefully my sound will be down. It is storming all of a sudden. I don't know if you can hear that. I hope you can hear the rain. There we go. Oh, it might be easier to read them over there. Okay. Well, let's see. What's the funnest story I can tell you about that time? So I told you guys about Turgis stories. Oh, you know what's amazing about these things is that I will mention someone or something that has happened along the way, and one of you that is listening might sometimes get in touch with someone I was telling a story about. And I had told you guys about Shawnee Turgis, and he got in touch with me, and it was so delightful to hear from him. And he's like a full-grown person now, and when I knew him back in the day, he was like the baby of the bunch. And I think I mentioned I didn't know if I should call him Shawnee or not. And So yeah, it's been really nice to get back in touch with people from this time, and we were talking about I want to go down there to the Bay Area to see friends, and there's also a Bruce Lee exhibit that's going on there right now. That of course I've seen 2 Bruce Lee exhibits in the last 2 years, 3 years, so it's starting to become a thing. And also I'll be turning 50 in next month. So because that's a huge birthday, it feels like a crazy huge birthday, and I would love to be there for that. And I can't believe it's been 20 years since I was there. Let's see. So what Shawnee and I were writing about, and what occurred to me yesterday that was so magical about that time was he's doing a whole bunch of gigs now, and he's going to be playing at some of the biggest performance venues there, like Yerba Buena Center for the Performing Arts, and I wanted to go down for gigs, but then I was thinking about what I really wanted to do if I saw everyone, and I was like, I love going to shows and seeing performances, but what I really loved the most about my experience in the Bay Area was that there were gigs. Of course, we were, all performing at different restaurants and, parties and places around. But we got together, I remember it as every weekend, either at Dan Cantrell's house or a Turgis house, or I think that was mostly it. And we would just hang out and get super drunk, and a lot of times I would fall asleep at the parties, but it was just dancing and, eating food and drinking and playing music and dancing. It was amazing. And I didn't realize how amazing it was at the time, because it was my life and all, what we were doing. So there were, I had adopted when I was in Santa Cruz before I moved to the Bay Area. I had seen Fat Chance, and I had adopted the head wrap, and was starting to try that out at restaurants. And I think I mentioned to you guys at the Marrakesh, I got laughed at by one of the owners, and didn't understand why, and now I think I understand why. But I started to play with different looks, and one of the things I really loved that Jill Parker was doing at the time was she wasn't doing it as much in performance, but for photo shoots she was starting to fuse her own fashion sense with belly dance, and was making it just like so fucking cool. I thought she was the coolest chick in the universe. And there was one image in particular that I posted, I believe, on Instagram, where she had taken a hip scarf and she had wrapped it around. She often wore a knot on the top of her head, and she had, whoa, it's getting very bright in here. And she had taken a hip scarf and wrapped it around so that there were coins falling everywhere. And then she would wear a skirt or big pants with platform shoes. They're back, but they were happening in 2000 also. And so there was, she was blurring the line between what was costume and what was day-to-day wear. And I was starting to wear more and more of the stuff that I wore on stage in my daily life. And also the video that I posted as a preview to this story, I'm wearing big Moroccan earrings. I'm wearing a big Tuareg necklace that I actually was a gift from a Tuareg friend of mine who made that piece, which you want to talk about feeling good about what you're wearing. I loved it, and I have no idea what happened to it. Oh, I saw it and was like, oh, no. That's a really fun story, how I met Musa Al-Baka. But so yeah, I was starting to experiment with blurring the line too between what I was wearing on stage and what I was wearing every day. And I really did feel like it was a way of life. It was the only music that I was interested in listening to. People I was hanging out with were also interested in that music and the culture. And I really, really unplugged from popular culture and from what other people my age were doing, and was just not interested in any of that. However, that being said, it was happening. I don't actually know how popular it was, but there was starting to be this electronic fusion, and with Chebby Sabah and, oh God, I can't remember something. It was two last names, and the song was Just You and I. Just You and I. I think it was Captain Kirk. I should try to find it and play it for you guys. So it was starting to happen. Tabla was getting sampled all the time. That was when electronic music first started really sampling ethnic music, and tabla was in everything. So there was this kind of, a popular culture thing that was coming together with belly dance again. And, it had also happened in the late 80s, maybe early 90s-ish, with the whole modern primitives, tribal tattoos thing. That was when Carolina was really starting to gain popularity, and that's part of the reason that the tribal name happened with this dance, was that whole modern primitives movement. But it was happening again, and I think Fat Chance was one of the first groups, at least the first that I knew of, to dance to electronic music. And but it was still absolutely, at least for me, the assumption was that it still had to be connected to source material. It still had to be from the East. Now, there was lots of music that I was using that was not normally used for belly dance music, especially not for more traditional rock sharky. But nobody was recording anything. There was no internet at the time, so I never felt a sense. I never felt like I was, this is not an excuse, this is just where I was at. I never felt like anyone would really care what I was doing. I was just playing with ideas, almost as an extension of playing with ideas at my house, but it was at the restaurant. So yeah, that was happening, and I was wearing cholis under hoodies, and I have some pictures of that I should post. I was sewing shisha into my jeans. There was Michelle and I started wearing pantaloons out places. Like, we would just go places in our pantaloons. And so yeah, there was definitely no sense of separation. And I don't think that felt weird at all to me, because I was starting to, in addition to the musicians, Michelle, more than I was, a couple of years later, was hanging out with the Braindrops crew, and that was the people that we met them. I'm smiling because of a personal story, but we met them just going into Braindrops, and there was so much ethnic jewelry in there. That's where I got those huge Moroccan hoops. And one of the first people that I ran into in there was my friend Dave, who is just this stunning human being who was just more adorned than any human I had ever seen in my life. And so we ended up years later, I don't even know how it really happened, maybe just because we're kind of cut from the same cloth, and that's where I got my tattoos and all my piercings, and then people started dating people, and we all just ended up hanging out. And so it really wasn't unusual to be wearing huge Afghani hoops and to be getting pierced. And so yeah, that's how that look started to evolve. And I started playing with different ideas on stage, and then when I would see photographs was really the only time that I could tell what it looked like. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but you think that your costume looks one way in the mirror, and then you see a picture of it and it does not look like that at all. So yeah, that started happening. And I started getting to play with different types of music, because dancing at a mirror on Tuesday nights was an amazingly low stress gig. So I could bring my little cassette tape. I would make a little tape. I think I'd make one every few weeks. And I would, oh God, it was so awesome. I would spend so long getting ready for it. And this may have also been where I started to really develop my stage persona as kind of an alter ego character, because from what I understand now, this is a part of some sort of religious forms of dance, but I just loved doing it by myself. I would take a bath and I would put on essential oils and I would go through this whole, I couldn't eat beforehand, so I was fasting because I was so excited, and I'd always want to, I don't know why, but the day of the performance, I'd always want to add something. Nobody else knew, nobody else cared, but I would know that I either made a necklace for it or I added something. And so every Tuesday would end up being, the whole afternoon would be this sort of ritual getting ready, and then I would get there and I'd be all, done up, and I'd have my wine, and this is before drinking was a problem, I think, maybe. It wasn't a problem at Amira anyway. I would always drink like 2 or 3 glasses of wine over the course of several hours, and I also loved talking to the patrons there, and I'm pretty gregarious and I really like people, and so after I would perform, I would want to see how people liked it, and if they weren't interested in talking, then I could take a hint, but I would thank them for coming, and sometimes a conversation would come up. And this is going to transition into the Pixar story, so before I transition into that, let me see what you guys have to say over here. My dad flied you down in Braindrops after Tribal Fest 6 and probably talked your ear off until my mom and my 17-year-old could walk back there to say hello. Oh, that is awesome. Well, it wasn't a matter of being kind. I really like talking to people. Let me see. Oh, the tree behind? Oh. We can see the tree behind you. I'm not sure what that means. You'll have to tell me later. You can kind of hear the rain. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're caught up. So, all right. Yes, the pre-performance ritual. I loved that part because I never really figured out why I loved performing so much, and especially kind of a low pressure gig like that. It was never full on Tuesdays. There were never a whole bunch of people there. Sometimes there would be other dancers or people that I knew, but for the most part it was pretty, it was pretty chill. A tree waving. I see, yes. They definitely do that. Oh, back there probably. So, so at one of these evenings in Amira, so just know that this process continued, the process of needing to make something, trying new music, because the owner really didn't care what we did. It being a Tuesday night, I could play with different stuff. So that ended up, let me see, that was Tuesday nights, and then after a little while, I started getting, I think I may have mentioned to you in the past, that I started working Friday and Saturday nights a lot because I offered, I want to remember to tell you the Cafe Istanbul story, how I even got to Amira in the first place. Oh, maybe I'll tell you that now. Okay, hold on. I got to tell you the story first. So the way that I got the job at Amira is kind of funny. It involves drugs, believe it or not. So, it's 2 a.m. That's okay. We'll work it out. I might have to ask. Let's see. So, Amira, I really wanted to dance there, and I went in for an audition, and I did not get my audition. I was super nervous. I don't remember if I danced to live music or not, but if I did dance to live music, I would have been crazy nervous because there were some heavy hitters playing drums there. There was Susu Pompanen was playing drums there. Mary Ellen Donald was playing there. Fucking Greta Darwish was playing there. So, yeah, I was pretty nervous, and I did not get the audition. They never called me back. So, fast forward a couple of months, and I'm in Jill Parker's troupe, and she says that some friends of hers have just come back from India, and it was Derek and Micah, her friends Derek and Micah, had just come back from India, and they had some stuff that they were displaying, and also some stuff that they were selling. And I wish I had it with me. It's this beautiful journal that I bought from Derek. So I went to that, and that was just right down the street from Cafe Istanbul. Cafe Istanbul was owned by the same person that owned Amira restaurant. And it was on Valencia Street. So I went to this, like a little mini gallery showing or something that Derek and Micah were having, and I bought this journal. And then I went out because I was going to walk to Cafe Istanbul directly across the street from Amira, because I had a gig there it was like a Turkish gig, I think. It was I remembered the singer's name. Her name was Fatima. She was from Turkey. And so it was Calvin and Sean and Lars and Fatma and Peter Jakes, and I think I saw Matt Fury was playing oud. So it was a bunch of people my age that were all playing, clarinet and oud and drum, and maybe there was a viol. I don't think Brianna was around yet. And so they were just having us, their friends come and hang out. And Cafe Istanbul was a little place, and it was super casual, not like Amira. So as I'm getting ready to leave Derek and Micah's showing, I go outside, and they're hanging out, and they're smoking some weed in front of this little gallery. And I think this was 2001. And I said, hey, can I have a hit off that? Because I was smoking at the time. And I took this huge, this just enormous hit off of this thing. And while it's in my lungs, or it might have been my second or third, actually, I don't remember, but I smoked a good amount of it. And then Derek was like, hey, be careful, that's opiated hash in there. And I was like, okay, thanks, I'll probably stop now. Because, I smoked weed from time to time, but I didn't smoke opiated hash on a regular basis. So then I start walking to Cafe Istanbul, and it's probably, 3 blocks, 4 blocks, and they're big blocks in the Mission in San Francisco. So I start walking, and after a couple of blocks, I remember looking down at the street and being like, oh, I'm fucked. I have to go dance in front of people right now, and I am just completely, super high. So I go into Cafe Istanbul, and I don't remember, the details. The only thing I remember is starting to dance and just blissing out. The music came on, and whatever they were playing was totally working for me, and the opiated hash was totally working for me, and I was just one of those I was so blissed out that I remember being in this warm, dark place. I didn't even know if people were watching. I didn't care if they were watching. I was just in it. And after the performance was over, the owner of the place offered me a job. The same person that didn't give me a call back for my nervous Nelly little rehearsal a few weeks ago, because I don't know if I mentioned, I may have, that Amira and Cafe Istanbul were owned by the same person. So clearly being all nerved up and freaked out did not, it wasn't doing me any favors, because the opiated hash performance got me the job. So it cracks me up, that experience. So now we can return to the original story about Amira being there, dancing on Tuesdays and starting to dance a lot on Fridays and Saturdays. And you know, Amira was so awesome for so many reasons, and it had a lot of, problems too, but the owner was such a nice guy, and all the musicians were a mix of Americans and people from the Middle East. So there was, usually 2, maybe 3 at the most musicians, because the stage was small, really, really, really small. It's like the size of the stage that I'm on now, basically. You could fit maybe 2 dancers and 2 musicians on there. So oftentimes it was Mary Ellen Donald with, oh God, how could I? This is the only thing about getting older I really, really don't like, which is forgetting names all the time. The Qanun player, God forgive me, she hasn't been with us for maybe 20 years. Mimi Spencer. So Mimi and Mary Ellen would usually play on a bunch of Saturday nights, and let's see, Nazir and Retta would play, I think, on Friday nights, and sometimes Susu. I don't even remember what the schedule was. Anyway, I digress. It was such an awesome mix of people that were from here and people that were not from here, and I didn't get the sense that anyone gave a shit what I was wearing. Like, the musicians were so open to talking about music, and they were always like, what do you want tonight? What do you want your set to be tonight? And they had their favorites, and we had a structure that we always followed, which was usually, opening song, which is, high energy, slow song, then sometimes a medium tempo song, kind of like middle, and then drum solo, and then finale, and then tip song. So it was usually 4 or 5 songs, and sometimes I could, request. They'd always ask, and I had some songs that I really loved, and they were some of my favorite times performing ever, and I feel like I knew it. I knew it at the time. I knew how lucky I was. I was so excited when I did finally get offered a regular Saturday slot, because I think Alina was tired of dancing the late slot on Saturday night. And I was so excited about getting offered the spot that I got a regular gig there. I just loved it so much. So that was the weekends. So I experimented on the weekends, but I didn't experiment quite as much as the dead Tuesday nights that I really loved, even though I spent more money on cab fare to get down there than I made on Tuesday nights. But one night I was dancing, and I started talking to a table of people that were sitting over by the window, and I don't remember exactly how I ended up sitting down, but I think we just started talking, and then, we had a bunch of stuff in common, and we got along so well, and they ended up asking me to pull up a chair, and they had finished their meal, so I was drinking wine, and we just hung out for hours. And somewhere in the middle or the end of that conversation, a woman named Mary was like, you should come teach at Pixar, because it was a bunch of people that worked at Pixar. And I was like, I have a friend that works at Pixar. And they were like, well, yeah, just come and you should teach. We have something called Pixar University, where all kinds of people come in and teach classes. It's not necessarily associated with Pixar. It's held on the Pixar campus, so to speak, but it's in a separate building, and Pixar doesn't pay the well, at least in my case, Pixar didn't pay me, my students did. So it was basically like, oh God, it was so awesome. They just offered the space. We had to schedule it, and then I didn't need to pay anything to use the room, and my students just paid me whatever my rate was directly. And they were amazing. Up until that point, I was teaching yoga and I was teaching belly dance conditioning, but I had never taught a dance class. And at this point, I was in school for dance. And so I was taking a lot of dance classes, and I definitely got a sense about how different teachers structured dance classes, because I was taking, for the dance ethnology degree, I got to take ethnic dance classes. So I was taking Kathak, I was taking flamenco, I was taking African Haitian, I was also taking choreography classes, and which became the basis later for composition in 8 elements. And then I was taking some modern classes, which were like the most difficult, emotionally challenging classes of my lifetime, I think. The teacher was great. I just didn't want to do it, and it was required. But anyway, so let's see. So at that point, I felt like, okay, I've taken enough dance classes at the college level from instructors who have all kinds of different approaches, and I think I can do it. But I didn't really know how to teach classes. Oh, and I'd also been taking from Carolina at this point, and I took an intensive with Suhaila, and I'd been taking from Habiru. So I was no longer a self-taught Orange County dancer. I felt like I had some experience, I could put something together. But knowing how to pace a class, teaching a choreography, especially because at some point, maybe after a year or so, maybe a year or two, we decided to do the student night at Amira that that Nana Candelaria held for her students. And so I thought, you guys want to do the student night over at Amira? And everybody was super excited. So teaching a choreography that built to, culminated in a performance was a brand new experience. And I get choked up in every one of these. They were so gentle with me, and were so kind and so incredible. You want to talk about positive reaches? Like, I had never encountered working with people like the people that work at Pixar. At least the people that belly dance and work at Pixar, because everything was like, what can we do next? There was no, oh, I can't do it, I don't get it, this is hard. That shit does not exist there. And because they're always doing something different, and they're always pushing themselves to the next level, and they're always trying to experiment to make it better. And they were straight with me about what didn't work, because you also can't get shit done if you're not addressing what isn't working. But they didn't dwell on it. They'd be like, well, this part, I didn't really know I don't remember even what they said, but at the time I was hypersensitive to critique because I was super insecure about my abilities. And even with all that hypersensitivity, they could put things in a way that didn't bring my defenses up. And I just loved every single one of those ladies that came to class. And quite a few of my favorite stories came out of teaching there. But I think I'm going to swirl those in later to preserve the anonymity of the people who work there, because I don't know, what they want the world to know about their dance experience. So I will keep those tucked away until the appropriate time. So yeah, that was my Pixar experience. And I think I taught at Pixar from about 2000 and one-ish, two-ish, I'm not sure, until I left for tour, until I met Miles Copeland and left for tour. And it was so sad to leave, and I didn't know if I was coming back. And I remember they were like, "You're not coming back. You're not coming back. You're going to go on tour, and your whole life is going to change." And, it was nice having you for a minute. We knew it wouldn't be a long time, and I was like, "You guys." And so, yeah, and they were right. I never went back. But yeah, it was a really special time. And man, I don't know if you can go tour the Pixar campus. I know that groups can. I don't know how official those groups need to be, but I had never seen a place like that in my whole entire life. You need to be approved to go in, and this was after Bug's Life came out, and Ants had done that thing that it did where, it had basically, from what I understand, it had, someone had leaked the Ants idea, and DreamWorks picked it up, and so now to go sort of behind the scenes and to just walk through Pixar to get to the classroom, you had to be vetted, and you had to have a beepy badge or whatever. You had to beep from one place to the other. And so that was kind of intense in itself. So I would drive in there in my totally beat up old gray Nissan Sentra with all the paint coming off of the hood, and poor thing, I cannot even believe how long that thing lasted. And all the things I did in that car. Anyway, so I loved that little car. So I would drive my beater, into this beautiful gleaming jewel of a building. And then I remember, I think Monsters, the first one, had just come out. So maybe the first few times I went in there. So they had these life-size, I feel like they were monster replicas, but they might have just been paper. I don't know. But they have a chef there. They had huge things of coffee in the center of the room. But my favorite thing was that they had this off to the side. You would go in, and it was all like, it was huge, this huge atrium. And I don't know if I'm bolstering my recollection of it, but I remember like bridges where the offices were. So there's this huge atrium, and it was like, like one of those hotels that you can see the balconies and the different floors, and it was like 2 floors maybe. And then you could go into this alcove that was pretty tall, and it was all counters, and it was sort of your own lunch prep kind of place if you weren't gonna, go get the chef's lunch. And it had so much cereal and snackage and beverages, and I was broke. I was so broke at the time. I was the kind of broke chick that when I went to the party, if there was food, I would like very quickly eat as much as I could, and just be like, oh, eat all the cheese, to the point where I would feel self-conscious, like people are gonna think I'm nuts over here, just like, so I would go in there and I'd have a couple of bowls of cereal, and I would have coffee, and it just felt so super deluxe, and it was amazing for me to be able to eat something other than chickpeas, because I was living on hummus. But of course, somehow I had the money to get tattooed and buy jewelry, which often puzzles me. Anyway, but it's true. I think I would come into money once in a while, like when I would get, I don't know how I did it, to be honest. I would cry that I wasn't going to make rent, and I feel like I didn't, have a lot of good food around, but I was buying jewelry and costumes. And I was very fortunate when I was in Ultra Gypsy that she made me what Jill called a core member at the time. So she had, I think, just 2 core members at the time. It was myself and Rose Harden. And core members didn't have to pay for classes. So I was going to Jill's classes a bunch, and I don't think I would have been able to afford as many classes as I took if I hadn't been a core member. So let's see. We got any, now the sun's out. This is what I like to call rainbow weather in Portland, and it does it all the time. It's one of my favorite things about living here, which is it will pour and there will be these huge fluffy clouds and dark clouds passing through the sky, and then out of nowhere it'll be sunny for 20 minutes and all these rainbows will happen, and then, it'll rain again. So we're currently in rainbow weather. Let's see. I think I'm going to pop over to the Instagram post. And, some of these amazing questions are starting to pile up. So I don't know if you guys saw this thing, but I have to say, I cracked my own self up with this. And I showed it to my mom after I made it, and she was like, "Oh, that's not your voice," which I gotta say is like a point of pride for me, because my lip syncing was so good that she didn't even my own mother didn't know it was not my voice. Okay, so the questions, I'm gonna need my glasses for this. You guys, we started on time today. Can I just have a moment of celebration that I don't think, knock on wood, I don't think we had a tech issue today. It only took 10 episodes. Well, let me tell you, after teaching hybrid classes and having everything go wrong that could possibly go wrong, I think my confidence has been boosted a little bit. Hi. All right. Oh, this is actually a really appropriate time for this. So, how did you start your own dance company? Advice for a dancer who wants to start one. Let's see what else is about now. So, all of these questions are great. I'm going to be looking at the questions that really have to do with 2001 to 2003 at the moment, unless I just can't help it. That's a good question. Injuries, age, advice. I kind of want to answer that one. This question, did you receive any great advice from anyone at that time in your life? And if so, who, what, and how did it help? Oh my God. Yeah, well, this question, I may have covered it already. There's a lot more of these, but what's something you miss from then and something you're glad to be done with from then? So I think something you miss from then, there's so many things that I miss from then. I miss brain drops. I miss Turgis parties. I miss having a bunch of friends my own age that are all into the same weird shit. I miss Amira Restaurant. Oh no, I'm gonna cry. This is all I think it is. No, I don't know if it's pre or post 9/11. Actually, a lot of these things that were happening, it was kind of a blur those few years. I miss being a dance student. I miss Chitrish Das's classes at the college. He was way, way too strict, I think, for me outside of the college, but I miss his lectures. I miss him making fun of us, constantly making fun of us. Girl, like we all chewed gum or something. I miss that feeling of discovery. I like not being discovered, but discovering things. I miss being excited by every new thing that I learned. I was like, oh my God, look at that. Look at those earrings. Look at those bracelets. Look what she's got. Oh my God. And just learning about Africa Adorned and going to Carolina's class, and I was like meeting my heroes. And I miss living in Noe Valley back when, plebes could live there, and I miss San Francisco the way that it was so much. And pre-Facebook San Francisco was a magical place. I miss, well, that wasn't from that time. That was from another time. One thing that I'm glad to be done with, let me see. I'm glad to be done with being totally broke ass. It was so scary. It was, I was unhealthy, and there were there were simpler things, sometimes about being broke like that, and I sure do miss having all of that free time. But I don't miss not having health insurance and not eating good food and struggling, just trying to get by. I can't think of a lot of other things I don't miss. I don't miss always hearing people scream profanities outside my window, because I lived in the Haight-Ashbury district and it was almost constant. And I remember one time being in the apartment and going, I wonder if I stop doing what I'm doing right now and turn the music off, if I'll hear someone screaming in the neighborhood, because it felt like it was all the time. And I turned the music off and I listened, and I heard, maybe a block away, I heard, fuck yeah, fuck it, fuck. And I was like, yep, there it is. Okay, great. Because I live just 2 blocks from Golden Gate Park. Oh, it's funny. There's little sirens just to remind me that it is everywhere. I don't miss hypodermic needles on the street. I don't miss that. And that's probably it. You know what else I don't miss? I don't miss relationship drama. I was reading my journals at that time, and I'm just going to be frank here for a moment. I was such a slave to my libido back then, I was in my late 20s and early 30s, in my first few years of BDSS. And for those of you who haven't gotten there yet, prepare yourself. There were times in my late 20s that I was like, oh, I think I understand, the stories about boys in high school lying to girls about like, I love you. I was like, no, I'd lie to somebody now. I'd lie to someone about now. So I was always in a relationship, and sometimes I was in more than one at a time when, everybody knew it. I never cheated, and I never had more than one going at a time unless we all knew that, it wasn't an exclusive thing. But with an active, how do I say this? I know I could just say it, you guys, but what gives me hesitation is in case somebody from my past who is one of these people watches it. How can I say this? When you're, let's just say, active and interested in being, let's just say I wanted to be having sex a lot, and I was having sex a lot. And when you're having sex a lot, then you are dealing with romantic stuff. And I fell in love over and over and over, and did not have a sense of my heart being as important as other people's hearts. So, in all of the journal entries that I've been reading lately from that time, I was like, I really want to support this person. I don't think we should be hanging out, but I love them and I want them to be happy. And I saw this over and over, not just with one person. And so, I don't want to be angry with them because I know that they're just doing what they need to do. And I had all of this willingness to be compassionate for them, but what I was missing was that my heart was just as important, and that it's okay to feel more than one thing. I can also be angry that it's not working out the way I want, and I can also be pissed off that even if they didn't know that they wanted to change things, I can be pissed that they didn't tell me. I used to think that being angry about something meant that there was someone to blame. But there doesn't always have to be someone to blame, and there's often 6 or 7 ways that you feel about a situation. So I do not miss that. I don't miss the confusion. I don't miss berating myself for having normal human emotions. I don't miss how much time I spent on getting ready to go out or whatever. I just don't miss any of it. And, you know, I thought that a slight decline in libido would be like the worst thing that ever happened to me because, I mean, Western culture, it's gasoline is people's sexual attractiveness, basically. Like, that's what all popular media runs on. That's what all pop culture runs on. That's what, you know, all the beauty culture runs on. All of it runs on, like, somebody wanting to take you home. And I feel like there is a lot more in the world than a couple monkeys getting it on somewhere, you know? It's like, I feel like the whole world has opened up to me. And, you know, it's not like I'm done being interested in relationships, but I haven't been in a relationship since 2015. Oh my God. I haven't been in a relationship since 2015. And, I mean, I've gotten busy since 2015, but I haven't, like, had a partner since then. And I had a friend's mother say to me one time when she went on a date, I was like, so you're gonna get a little, and she was like, oh no. She said the most profound thing. She's like, it's just not worth waking up the sleeping dragon. I don't want to wake it up. It's fine. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. So there is like a point where this dragon goes, okay, you know, I might as well sleep in all of my gold until it's time to wake up. And, you know, there is so much going on. In 2015, I also inherited all of these businesses and did tour online and didn't inherit. I mean, my partner and I started them together, but he decided he wanted to move to New Zealand and I could either shut it down or keep them. I decided I wanted to keep them going. So where I was, you know, touring and doing 8 Elements and was busy before, then there was the studio, there was, you know, needing to hire someone to run the studio. There was figuring out how to tour online was going to work. There was figuring out how 8 Elements was going to work. And luckily, a lot of the employees that we had stayed on when he left, so it was not an impossible task because people knew what their tasks were. But he also was the holder of all of the information, and we immediately divided it up into departments, and people started taking on responsibility for an entire department rather than sort of a task at a time, which is how we had it before. I don't know how I went there. That's what I don't miss, I guess, is how I went there. Hope you guys wanted to know all that. A couple of monkeys getting it on. A couple of hairless apes just going at it. There are flowers. There's art. There is learning how to get involved in business. There is, you know, collage. There's tarot. There's so many things. There's juniper. Let's see. Yeah. I'm so happy I was able to stay on, learn, and grow. And, you know, I still think it's too many things for a single person, but maybe someday I'll stop whining about it because it's not one person, first of all. It's not. Second of all, I'm okay. I'm alive. It's not. Sometimes it feels like, you know, when I was just performing, I could put my energy into improving on one thing, and I constantly feel like I'm failing because each department sort of has its time of the year, so I can't really just roll up my sleeves and totally immerse myself in Datura Online like I would like to, or totally immerse myself in developing 8 elements like I would like to, because then I have to switch focus. That's the only reason that I whine about it, because I love to hyper focus and I love to just get elbows deep in something and just and develop it. And I now is a time in my life that I can't do that, and I may never be able to do that again. I don't know. I really don't know. All right. There's a, where did 2003 Rachel see herself at 49, and how is it different? It's totally, I mean, there's nothing in my life that I thought I would be doing at 49. Nothing. I thought I was going to quit belly dancing at 40, and that I would probably teach yoga and movement and do that for the rest of my life, because I knew some old yoga teachers. I knew some 80-year-old yoga teachers that were still moving and were still got to travel and interact with people. And if I can't travel and interact with people, it's not good. So I just figured I would teach yoga for the rest of my life. I certainly never thought I was even. I never thought this space. Honestly, this space. I think it's the most beautiful dance space I've ever seen in my whole life. I mean, this is a magical happening. So yeah, I didn't think I'd be doing any of this. And I don't know, I figured I would still have kind of a youngish approach to life because of my dad. My dad, when he was 40 and 50, he knew, let's just say this, he knew about MIA before anyone my age did back in the day. He was always discovering new stuff, and he had this whole life of discovery, and he had this thirst for knowledge, and he was constantly getting into stuff that was coming out. So I was hoping that I would pick that up from my dad, and I don't have that same thing in the same way. But I have it in, my curiosity is still strong when I have enough energy. Unfortunately, I seem to have contracted some kind of a chronic illness. That's another thing I didn't expect to have. And it seems to be doing better now. I've known that I've had it since like 2019, and I started having various symptoms. But the worst symptom is really that it affects my energy level, and it affects my willingness to do anything. So I've worked from my bed several times, and I didn't expect any of that either. So I'm really hoping that I just started acupuncture because I tried the Western medicine thing, and 11 doctors later with people, gaslighting me and telling me that my symptoms don't exist, which is so fun. I hope none of you ever have to do that. I'm seeing an acupuncturist, and I've also accepted that this thing that I have is probably not going to go away, so I just need to stop trying to obliterate it and learn how to manage my symptoms. So wish me luck on that. Let me see. Will I travel to teach again? I am planning on doing, here's the current plan, which is always subject to change based on, the world's health and my own personal health, but I have a fall tour booked that's been booked since it was supposed to be the 2020 tour. I love traveling, but I don't want to travel as much as I did. So I'm thinking maybe like one 6-week tour a year, maybe a 6-week tour and then a shorter tour earlier in the year. But, it all depends on how many new diseases crop up in the coming years. Let's see. Yeah, I would love, yeah, I probably will. I do want to do more stuff at home, though. I'm here, so, I just want to be in here. Okay, what other questions and how are we doing? 6 o'clock. Maybe 15 more minutes? What do you say? Let's see. Oh, a typical 2003 day in the life. God, I can't remember 100%, but I'll do the best I can. So let's say if I was going to school, this would have been early 2003. I would get up and I would always go to the coffee shop across the street, and this is probably why I didn't have money. And I would get a triple mocha and everything bagel with cheese, I think, from, oh no, I'm forgetting every name of every person. Not Fadl. It was Coal Valley Cafe, Jawad. I'd go get, a coffee, a triple mocha. At the time, that's what I was drinking. It's so funny now that I actually can support myself. I feel like going to a coffee shop is an extravagance. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, I did it every day. I went and visited Jawad over at Coal Valley Cafe across the street from my house. And then I would get on the N train and I would go to San Francisco State and I would take a whole bunch of classes. And then in the evening, if I didn't have a class or a rehearsal, I'd probably either go to Tobias's house and hang out, or I would go to a Turgis party, or I would go to a show, or I would be in a show. So I was never home ever. And so I really loved just living in a house with a whole bunch of people. And I did that a few times because basically my room was just a closet because I did not live at home. I did not spend any time at home. And at first I lived in Noe Valley and with 2 Jeffs and a Lisa. And that's another funny story, actually, getting into that place. And then after that, I moved into the Castro and lived in a house called the Magic Funk Palace. And that's what I meant on Instagram when I was like, I lived in a house with a nickname. And so if you have a house that has a nickname like the Zendo or, the Magic Funk Palace, if it's the fill in the blank house, a bunch of people live there. And there's probably all kinds of stuff going on there. So I lived at that place. And then after my first tour, I lived in, I'm telling you a typical day after tour, because Coal Valley Cafe, I didn't move to Haight-Ashbury District until after tour. But that's all right. I mean, I'm sure I went to I've been going to a coffee shop every single morning of my life since I moved out of my mom's house, as far back as I can remember. As soon as I left high school, that's what I started doing every day, except not anymore. Let's see. Everything Bagels are live. Oh, Amaryllis, I might post episode 9, but if I don't, I promise I will cover that material because, it might have been a hot mess. But you won't miss out on anything, I promise. And let me know if there's anything in episode 9 in particular that you really, really wanted me to talk about, because I can make sure all those topics are covered. Let me see. Let's see. Okay. So, that was a typical day in the life. Another version of a day in the life was when I would get up to teach a really early yoga class, which I never liked until I got there, and then I was so glad that I was teaching at my 7 a.m. classes. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, my tattoos. My favorite books during that time. Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see. What was I reading at the time? A lot of textbooks. I think I was mostly reading textbooks at the time because I was in school. That's when I was introduced to the art of making dances, which I still love hate. Oh God, I was so pissed off at that book when I read it. That's also when I first read The Intimate Act of Choreography. And that also stuck with me. And there wasn't a ton of reading that I can remember. Yeah, I don't. I know I was doing morning pages because I have volumes and volumes and volumes of journals from that time. Let's see. I do, about living with, there's a question in here about living with Sharon and Zoe, and that was later on. That's when we get to Monaco in like 2005, I think. Was when I started dancing regularly with Zoe, but I would like to tell you the first time that I ever saw Zoe dance, because that story is hilarious. Well, it's not hilarious, but it's telling, and I like thinking about it. So I was at Cafe Istanbul, and I think a whole bunch of us were performing with our friends, the band that I had told you guys about earlier, and I think actually I wasn't performing. I think I was just hanging out, and I remember what Zoe was wearing, and I really remember her hair. So I don't know why that really stuck with me, but she had been dancing for 6 months at that time, so she was a pretty brand new beginner, and beginner intermediate, but she was already really good, and she had I remember these big yellow, I think they were like a yellow gold, maybe satin, they had a satin feel anyway, pants with little flowers on them, pantaloons, and her hair was up on the sides and the back was down and really long, and she had curled it so they were in these really bouncy curls. And I think I remember the bouncy curls way down. I mean, it was mostly straight, but it was just curly at the end. I think I remember them because of their movement, because I love movement extenders so much, and I love the way costuming moved. I probably was watching the curls because I liked the way they moved. And I remember the look on her face, like she would look here, and she would look there, and she would look here, and she still has that about her in her dancing. But I remember very clearly turning to the person next to me and being like, man, watch out for that one. And I don't remember exactly what I saw that made me realize, like, she's gonna shred. Like, she's new now, and she's already that good, and she's gonna be insane. But what I think I remember is the hunger that she had, is the, like, I think she was even more enthusiastic than I was about stuff. She was like, oh my God, have you seen the blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, oh, that's all right. She'd be like, oh, it is so, we would just like dork out on dance and be like, oh my God, I love this and I love that. And have you seen this? And she was so incredibly energetic and excited and into it, man. She's more into it than anyone I had ever seen, and was already strong. So that was my first impression of her, and we liked each other immediately and started hanging out immediately, and she was just nuts. Like, the stuff that she would do, I would always be like, God, she is so brave. And I'll let her tell you those stories because they're not my stories to tell, but just know this, she was always courageous. She was not afraid to do stuff that was taboo. She just seemed fearless, and she was in a bunch of different groups from the beginning. She did all kinds of different types of dance. She was a majorette in March 4th, and she just didn't seem like anything scared her at all. And at one point, I mean, since the beginning, she's the hardest working dancer I've ever known, besides Jolena. I remember at one point she had like 9 or more gigs in a week. Like, she wasn't whiny like I was about going places. She would drive, like 2 hours to this restaurant and then drive another 90 minutes to this other restaurant on the same night, and was just like gigging. She was just like, whatever she wanted to do, she was just gonna go for it. And plus, she was hilarious and just like nuts. She's just nuts. So that's what it was like meeting her, and she became best friends with Elizabeth Strong. I don't know if she became, or I don't remember how they met or how they became really close. But at one point, way early on, Elizabeth and Zoe and I wanted to start a collective. But I was in school at the time, and Zoe was 2 hours late. And I mean, I'm sure, comfortable with me telling that story, because she said that she was super late to everything all the time at that time. She's totally gotten over that now, but she was 2 hours late to, I think, our first collective rehearsal. And I was like, I can't do this. I've got school. I've got I can't do it. So I ended up not continuing with them. And then, always kept in touch with her. We saw, basically, one thing that was amazing about that time in San Francisco was, it was just kind of understood that we were all going to support each other. And it wasn't like, go to this person's show to support them out of any kind of, sense of duty, or we just all were at all these same shows all the time. And so, you didn't even have to make plans to hang out with your friends, because, are you going to be at this thing on Wednesday? Yeah, I'll totally be there. And we'd all just see each other constantly. Those were the days. So, yeah. And then I actually met Sharon. I think I told that story last week or the week before. I met Sharon going to a show to watch Zoe, who I think was dancing in Fairfax with Helm and a bunch of dancers that night, and Sharon was there. And I think that might have been episode 9. So I'll have to check and either release that video or tell that story again. Let's see. Let's see. Want to hear about Marty Love? Oh, you will. Marty enters the story. I told a little bit about Marty last week. She enters the story in 2004 or 2005. So let's see. How about we end this, since we're in 2003, we can end the story with how I met Miles Copeland. And then you'll know where Marty is in the timeline. Yeah, because last week in episode 9, I talked about Urban Tribal and meeting Heather Stantz and meeting Marty Love. And so let's see. Michelle Campbell really enters the picture a ton more after the Lollapalooza tour, which I thought was going to be part of this one, but that's a whole thing. Yeah. So, hold on. Lollapalooza. So, let me tell you how I met Miles Copeland. So, I was performing at Ricasa, and there is the flyer. Where is it? Right over here. Can you hear me now? Sorry, I had to switch microphones for a second. So, save those. Yeah. So there's this flyer right in the middle, right below the Rachel Bryce Yoga and Belly Dance, the blue one. There's that image. I wonder if I can make this a little bigger. Sorry, it's not a better quality. But this image here, Rickshaw and Rachel Bryce, Ricasa Cabaret Stage, Sunday at 3 p.m. That was the flyer for the Ricasa performance that I was going to do. And Rickshaw was Tobias's crew that was a bunch of his students, and I think there may have been, I don't know, 10 drummers or something like that. And I don't remember why I put this image of myself with myself, but you know what is, oh God, this costume, I have this more clearly somewhere else. I should put it up. These two costumes they're interesting stories in themselves. The one of me in the back, I'm performing there at a show called Taksim that happened every month, and it was kind of like a Turkish dance party. It was put on by this guy from Turkey, and it was mostly for people from Turkey that were hanging out in the Bay Area. And I loved that that place because it was, most of the time it was outdoors, but I had made these pants that were kind of my own version of Melodia pants, and they were super shiny. They looked like I don't know, there were these skin tight jazz pants that looked like tight leather or whatever, so I used to wear those at Taksim. And then the other costume is a costume that is sort of like a cabaret fusion costume that I made when Nana Candelaria and I did a collaboration. So I will be returning. Hello. Okay, so where were we? So that Rickshaw Rachel Bryce flyer that I just showed you, that was at Ricasa, and I was really excited about that performance. I made all of these, printed out all these flyers and hand cut them, and I would go put them on different booths, sort of front area, and say, hey, can I just leave all these flyers here for you? And it was the side room, it wasn't the main room, and it was so awesome because so many of my friends were there, and I watched the VHS after the fact, and I hadn't realized that Zoe and Elizabeth had come for that performance. And it's so cute how supportive we were of one another, and because they come running in and they sit on the floor and they're all like, oh yeah! It was just an amazing, amazing group of friends. And so I did this performance with Tobias's Rickshaw, and it was so fun to dance with them because Tobias really loved to create more kind of structured compositions, and he was also really into Balkan music. So it wasn't what I was really used to hearing when it came to doing drum solo stuff. Plus, it was a lot of frame drums, and there was a tabla beledi there, and which is the big drum, which he called tepan, which is Turkish, and tabla beledi's, I think it's Egyptian. I think I gotta check my make sure that's still what it's called. Anyway, not still, but was ever. Anyway, big drum, unusual rhythms, totally excited. We did like a 10-minute performance. And if I watch that VHS tape again, you can see Miles in the audience. So here's what happened. Miles was there at Ricasa because he was making the film American Belly Dancer. Belly Dance Superstars was already starting to happen. And he was, I don't think they had toured yet, but they'd already done some stuff in Los Angeles. And he was interviewing all of these people that he had heard of for American Belly Dancer. And he interviewed Mary Ellen Donald, who I had worked with at Amira, but also had danced with quite a few times at her student shows. I loved dancing at her student shows, and I love Mary Ellen. And Mary Ellen makes the best cardamom cake on this side of my mom's muffins. And I love that she always had cardamom cake and gardenias at her shows. So Mary Ellen and I had a great relationship, and Miles was getting ready to go to Bali, I think, to do some concert, and he told Mary Ellen that he was looking for some more Desert Roses, that he had his soloists, but he was looking for Desert Roses. And she said, I remembered that she told me specifically, there's a dancer and you might be interested in her as a soloist. She has a different style. So I don't know if you'd be interested in seeing her for a Desert Rose, but you might be interested in her as another soloist. And he's like, no, I have all the soloists I want. So he shows up at that performance, and I was helping my friend Michael vend his stuff, and he had come back from India. He'd sent like 17 parcels of shisha and other fabrics back from India, and so I was helping him sell those at Ricasa. And Miles came up to me after the performance and was like, oh, my name's Miles Copeland, and I managed, the Police and Sting and the Go-Go's and the Bangles in the 80s, and now I'm doing this thing, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Let me just say that when I worked at Amir, there were all kinds of people that came up with all kinds of ideas about shit that I should do or should be doing or whatever, like, oh, let's make a DVD series, and oh, I'd like to, fly you to blah, blah, blah. And they never would, and they'd never call. And Miles had this really kind of frenetic energy at the time and was very, now that I know him, I know it's just the way he presents himself, especially in a business setting, where he's like, these are my accomplishments and this is why you should take me seriously. But I took it as boasting and thought he was full of it, actually. And I was like, okay, whatever, white-haired guy. And he said, I'd like to talk to you more. Where should I meet you? And I told him where Michael's booth was and that I would be over there. And then I promptly forgot about it. And then when I came back to Michael's booth, I remember Michael going, that weird guy that you were talking to came by looking for you. And I was like, he did? So just the fact that he had some follow-up and he wasn't just, talking a bunch of whatever, that was like, oh, okay, maybe he is putting something together. And then a bunch of guys with big cameras came and were like, hey, could we interview you for American Belly Dancer? Can you talk about the style that you do? It's different. I was like, sure. So there's a little spot in American Belly Dancer where I'm like, well, it has this in it and this in it and classical Indian and flamenco. And I watch that now and it sounds disrespectful, like I just do whatever the hell I want. But at the time, this is what I was studying. I was in school, I was studying flamenco, I was studying Kathak, I was, actively investigating. I wasn't just looking at pictures of a Kathak dancer and being like, I'll do that with my elbows. I was listening to lecture by my teacher, Chitrish Das, every single week. So it's not, that doesn't mean that I have some right to fuse. I just mean that when I hear it now, I'm like, oh, that just sounds like I just take from wherever, but that's not how I felt about it at the time. Anyway, so they did this, what kind of style do you do? And then he brought up Lollapalooza, and then he got my attention because, my age, it was 2003, I was in my late 20s, probably 28 at the time, and when I was a teenager, Jane's Addiction had just come out with Ritual de lo Habitual, and I was 16, maybe 17, and I fucking loved Jane's Addiction, and Dave Navarro, loved Dave Navarro, and the fact that he was saying that he thought that he was going to get us on the Lollapalooza tour and that I would be on tour with Jane's Addiction, then I was like, oh, well, then you have my attention and I'm definitely interested. I didn't know who any of the other bands were, except I knew Chris Cornell was also going to be on tour. And I didn't know Incubus at the time and or any of the other bands, actually. I just cared about Dave Navarro. That's what I cared about. So then I was nervous and super excited and made plans to go on tour for, it was going to be 3 months in the summer of 2003. And that was not that far in the future. I think Ricasa happens in May or something. So it was just a couple of months away. Yeah, that's how I met him. And then I started getting really nervous that he wasn't going to get in touch. I went from like, whatever, that total weirdo to like, is that guy gonna call? Because I want to be on the road with Dave Navarro for 3 months. And oh my God, and I could listen to Jane's Addiction every night, and I could, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, well, it doesn't happen till I have a contract. It doesn't happen till I have a contract. And then the contract came. Oh, I get nervous even thinking, just revisiting it. I'm like, oh, I was, here I am. You guys know what I was doing at the time. Every day was like, get up, have a cup of coffee, try to eke a living. I loved my life. I loved my friends. I loved the gigs that we were doing. I loved that performance naturally grew out of the life that I was already living. There was no separation between now I'm a performer. It felt more like, oh, we practice all the time and we, play together all the time, and I actually dress like this basically most of the time. And now I'm just going to get a little extra dressed up and let you guys watch basically what I do every day anyway. It didn't feel like some separate thing. It felt so just authentic, and it never really occurred to me at the time that I was living an unusual life, or that I was dancing a dance form that was not indigenous to my own culture, because it certainly felt authentic, but it wasn't. However, we were all serious students at the time, and we considered ourselves dedicated students. We certainly didn't think that we were doing the real thing. In fact, one of my very favorite quotes about this is from Peter Jakes, who was the band leader. He started Brass Menagerie and was the band leader for Brass Menagerie, and was the one that introduced me to the amazing Slowdowner, by the way. But he said, the guy practiced and practiced constantly, and became a crazy shredder, and said, I'll always, no matter how much I play and how much I practice, I'll always have an American accent. And that really impacted me, because I knew what he was talking about. There's a flavor, there's an accent, there's a feeling in music when you are raised in a particular culture that you can, of course, learn a ton about and even immerse yourself in. But, people have moved here from other places. They can live here for 50 years and still have their accent. So that I was always aware of the fact that I was going, to always have a bit of an American accent. But I felt like I didn't feel like I was putting on a costume when I got dressed and went up there. I felt like I was putting on what I wanted to be wearing all the time anyway. And so anyway, back to Lollapalooza. It was kind of the perfect gig, the perfect time. I was just finishing up school, and I had been crying to Tobias a few months previous to that I didn't know what I was going to do. School did nothing to prepare me for the dance world. I didn't know how I was going to make a living, and I was like, now I'm in debt, and I took a bunch of classes, and I don't regret it at all, but it certainly didn't teach me how to get a job as a dance teacher. It didn't lay out my options. None of that was explained to me. I didn't know what I was going to do. And all of the teachers that I really respected, that I was taking class from, had a career. There were several teachers that had gone through the dance program and then had just turned around and gotten a job at the school, so they never had their own career. And I didn't feel like they were sharing as much from their own experience as the professors like Chitrish Das and Rosa Montoya, the teachers that had lived their life as professional dancers in their fields. I got so much out of their classes. I really wanted to have a career, but I didn't. There wasn't one. There was not one. I mean, if you've ever seen Gaggio Dillo, you see the life that they're leading, where they hang out and they play music, and then they get a wedding gig and they all get in the car and go play the gig. I figured that was going to be the closest thing to a dance career for me because there was no such thing as a belly dance career. You didn't have one. You danced at Amira. If you got really lucky, maybe you got flown somewhere else to teach a workshop, but that was not like a regular thing. So yeah, this was the beginning of a life that did not previously exist, could not even be planned for because Miles hadn't happened yet. And this style of dance that I was doing in 2003 really emerged out of my experience in the Bay Area with all of those friends, after having been, a more traditional American style restaurant dancer for a decade beforehand. And then I happened to move to the Bay Area. I make friends with the Braindrops crew. I start to fall in love with more heavy adornment. It all just sort of like converged into this crazy magic time, and Miles happened to pop in there like Belly Dance Superstars happen, right place, right time. And I was definitely ready. I was practicing a lot, but I wasn't practicing as much as I was about to be practicing. And that's when Michelle Campbell entered my life. And I think we could probably leave it there. So the next one will be Lollapalooza. We'll leave it with signing the contract with Miles and moving out of my place in the Magic Funk Palace because I couldn't afford rent while I was on the road. So I had to just like throw caution to the wind and put all my stuff somewhere and go on the road and have no idea what would happen when I came back. And that's that. So, any other questions before we say goodnight? Yeah, belly dance really had a moment because of BDSS. It must have been such a wild ride meeting Miles and getting swept up in it. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't prepared for what happened. I mean, I would go dance at Amira and people would watch and they'd appreciate it. And my students at Pixar were so supportive, and some students when I lived in Santa Cruz were super supportive. But I mean, I never expected the reception that I got. I mean, there were times I would walk in the room and a lady cried once. I was like, what the fuck is happening? You're just, oh my God, this is, and then people are like, I'm sorry, you must think I'm so weird, I'm a fan. I was like, I'm a fan of my dance teachers. I know exactly, well, I don't know exactly how that person was feeling, but I know the feeling of just being so excited that someone that you've been watching on, well, it was on tapes or CDs because there wasn't YouTube yet. And that was the other thing that contributed. YouTube just started happening right around, I don't know, 2003, 2004 maybe? Can you imagine a time before YouTube? Nobody was videoing this stuff, which is why thankfully I have a bunch of CDs that I'm slowly ripping, and you will be seeing them on Instagram. I think that's probably what my Instagram is going to be while I'm not going out there and performing, which, to be honest with you, I don't know what's going to happen with performing from here on out. I really don't. And don't take that as a definite retirement yet. I don't think I've retired from performing yet, but I might be close. I don't know. But there's a lot of footage out there, so don't worry. You'll see new dances from me, and I have a bunch of Indigo footage too. We recorded the whole Serpent Rouge a couple of times. So hopefully there'll be lots more stuff coming out. We'll see what I have time for. Yeah, how could you be prepared? Once in a lifetime thing. Yeah, I mean, we might see something like that happen again, but man, yeah, Miles was what a thing to happen, huh? What a crazy thing to happen. And so many people hadn't seen that style of dance before. And, I was at that point kind of used to it. And Jill Parker had been doing it. I'd been watching Fat Chance for years and years, but I remember how I felt when I first saw it, and the contrast, you guys. I mean, there was like really, really pink, sparkly dancers that were super feminine, and we were really, really like juicing up the dark element at that time. And so we would all come out, just like giving the audience these looks. And we weren't putting it on. It felt very real, like how I wanted to be expressing myself. But, with these big, chunky horns and bones, and like I had this Tibetan flint box. It's like what they use as their matches on right here, that was like covered in turquoise and like dark leather, and this big bone, and these huge earrings. And we'd come out basically like people were like, what is happening? It was so fun. It was really fun. So yeah, all those stories are on the way, and I can't wait to tell them to you. So, you saw it in Bellingham. Oh my God. Yeah. It'll happen. I mean, yeah, it could be really exciting. I really hope that we have the Serpent Rouge with the Gallus brothers. That show was so amazing. But I'm getting into the future. I have to wait. So I'll see you next week, and I can tell you the Dave Navarro stories that I have, because they're a couple, but not what it sounds like. I'll just, relieve you of that concern. Not concern, but, I'll answer the question right now. I've basically painted myself as a bit of a hussy, and I certainly, enjoyed my youth. Let's just put it that way. But I never hooked up with Dave Navarro, I'm afraid. It just didn't feel right. But he's hilarious, and he was super friendly, and I have some stories of things that he told me that he just cracked me up. Yeah. Okay. Well, then I think with that, if I can find my cursor, with that, I will ask you to please return your seats to the upright and locked positions and put your tray tables away. And we will prepare for landing. And I'll see you next week. How about I gotta fix this title. But I'll fix the title card and leave you with that, so you guys can talk amongst yourselves for a little while.